everyone, it's Brennan. Welcome to my channel and welcome to a very ambitious video where I'm going to rank every single thriller that I read this year. So welcome to this video. I'm going to try my best to not take up an hour here. I'm going to try to be very succinct with why I liked or why I disliked these books. I have read 31 thrillers in the year of 2021, and I just wanted to look back on all of them and put them in order. But I was kind of new to thrillers this year. I had read a few in the past years, but I really dove into that genre pretty hard this year. I listened to most of these on audio. It's just really entertaining for me to listen to a thriller. Let's stop that rambling and let's jump in. I'm gonna go from my least favorite to my most favorite. And if you see me looking down, it's because I have my list pulled up on my computer. And my least favorite thriller and one of my least favorite books that I read in 2021 was Local Woman Missing by Mary Kubica. I did not like how unsettled this book made me, and if you enjoy that in a thriller, then maybe you'll like this. Actually, a lot of people have loved this book, like given it 5 stars. And for the sake of time, I won't give you a full synopsis on the plots of these books, just because I feel like a lot of them are super popular, you probably know. But I just felt kind of icky reading this book, especially the first part of it. You're reading from the viewpoint of a child who is locked in a basement, and then that child gets found. It was just really unsettling. I didn't love it. The ending of it was super twisty, but when we got to it, I was just like, oh, okay, that's the ending. And that's just not the feeling I want to have at the end of a thriller. In number 30, I have Hairpin Bridge by Taylor Adams. I feel like this was pretty disappointing for a lot of people. What I did not like was how the entire book was basically a standoff between this young girl. She's like 23 or so. She's a twin and her sister has committed suicide, but she doesn't think it's a suicide. And this cop she thinks is involved, and basically the whole book is them having a standoff on this bridge and us seeing something from the sister's viewpoint and then us finding out that it wasn't true. And I did have a great time reading this book. Number 29, I have Survived the Night by Riley Sager. This was his new release this year. The main thing that I did not like about this book was how the plot was set around our main character, this girl in college, having this condition where she sees things that aren't real. She calls them movies in her head, and she will just like experience something and then find out that she wasn't experiencing that at all and that it wasn't reality. And I have just found that books with that as a plot element, I do not like. This was another one where we got to the end and I was just like, okay, I wasn't expecting that, but I don't feel anything. In number 28, I have The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. What I have learned about Alex Michaelides' books, which I think he only has the 2, The Silent Patient and The Maidens, I just don't care about his characters. They are not built in some kind of way that makes me enjoy a book. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I just feel like none of them really have these distinguishable personalities. And that's mainly what I didn't like about this book. I didn't like the main character. She's a woman who has lost her husband at a young age, and her niece is at this college where there have been some murders. And I just thought this plot was so unrealistic, namely in the fact that this college didn't think it was weird or inappropriate that this group of girls got together as a fan club for this male professor and called themselves the Maidens. That was just so yucky, and I could not believe that this academic university, it was Cambridge, did not think that that was alarming. And in 27, I have Confessions by Kane Minato. This is a Japanese thriller, and I ended up giving this 3 stars. It was a super quick read, but the characters just all reacted very dryly to these hugely crazy things that were happening in the plot. And I think that's like a thing that people like about this, because the plot was very interesting. This middle school teacher has a young daughter who drowns, and she knows the teacher knows that a couple of her students were involved in it. So she basically leaves her class with a threat and then says, peace out, I quit, but I'm gonna get back at you all. And then it's these kids like living with this feeling that she has left them with. It was super intriguing for sure, but I don't think it was for me. And then in, what number are we on? 26. I have Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. This is the most recent book on this list that I've read, and this is another one, like Riley Sager's book, where one of our characters has a condition and the plot just hinges on it. We're following a husband and wife, and the husband has facial blindness. I don't know if that's a real thing or not, but he literally cannot identify people. Like, he looks at someone and he doesn't see their face. So he can't pick anyone out in a crowd, and that's just a pretty convenient point on your plot. But the setting for this was super nice. It was snowy. We were in Scotland at this really creepy chapel. I did enjoy the twist in it, totally didn't see it coming, but it was another one where I was just like, this plot just feels so convenient. I'm not having the best time. So those 6 I will call my least favorite thrillers of the year. I gave all of those 2 to 3 stars. 3 stars for me. I know for a lot of people 3 stars is like a perfectly good book, but when I give a book 3 stars, I have some big issues with it. That's just my personal rating. So now these next however many books we have left, I enjoyed. In 25, I have The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn. This book is super short. This is a short story. It's like 60 pages. I read it all in one sitting, and it was entertaining, but for me, that's just not enough to get me invested in a book. This is just a really interesting, creepy short story by Gillian Flynn, who is an excellent thriller writer. And is it a little paranormal? Is it not paranormal? I don't know. You should read it and let me know. At number 24, I have One by One by Ruth Ware. I had a really good time reading this. I feel like I mainly hear negative reviews on this. It does have a lot of viewpoints, so I can see how that can get overwhelming. We have like 7, 9 different viewpoints. This tech company goes for a retreat at this ski lodge, and then they start dying one by one. In number 23, I have A House at the Bottom of a Lake by Josh Malerman. This is another one where it was just so short that I didn't fully get invested, but this has really great summertime vibes. We're following a young couple. They're like 18, they just start dating, and they start canoeing out onto this lake, and then they find a house at the bottom of it. This is another one. Is it paranormal? Is it not paranormal? Again, let me know. In number 22, I have Velvet Was the Night by Sylvia Morano Garcia. This is one that I wasn't sure if I should put on this list because truly, this is more historical fiction. It is action-y. We are in, I'm going to say Mexico, but I'm not sure if it's Mexico. We're somewhere in Latin America, and this very unlikely heroine, she's a secretary. We're set in like the 1960s, I believe, 1960s or 70s. She's a secretary and she's not really in love with her life, and then she gets roped into this really dangerous, I don't even know if there are any good guys in this book, but a girl goes missing and she had some photos, and a couple different groups are after the photos and that girl. We don't know what happened to her, and this secretary gets roped into it, and I enjoyed this, but I don't really know that I would call it a true thriller. At number 21, I have The Patient by Jasper DeWitt. I hope I'm getting these names right because I only wrote down the titles and not the authors, so I apologize if I like spout out an author name and it's just wrong. This is another shorter book. It's closer to 200 pages, it may be. I was in love with the first part of this book. It is like a medical thriller, and there's this patient, and he's been admitted to this institution for most of his life. Like, he got admitted when he was 6, and now he's like 30. And I was loving the first part when we were very just like chart reviewing. We have a new psychiatrist at this institute who thinks he's gonna cure this patient. And then it kind of takes a turn, and pick it up if that sounds interesting to you. In number 20, I can finally hold up a physical book. I have The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. This is a summer camp thriller, and some girls went missing from a cabin at this summer camp, and then as an adult, one of their cabin mates comes back to teach at this camp, and we try to find out what happened to those girls when they disappeared. In number 19, I have The One by John Mars. Fun fact, this was the first book I read this year. Another book that I don't really know I would call a thriller, and people also call it science fiction. It is very light on the thriller and the science fiction. It's more like speculative literary storytelling. You've probably heard of this. It's also a Netflix series now, but I haven't heard the best things about the Netflix series. But you follow lots of different viewpoints from people who have used this app, this dating service where you give them your DNA and then they match you with the one for you, your soulmate. And as you can imagine, that might cause some issues. Maybe some people are already married, and you get those people's stories, and it's really entertaining. We have a little bit of traveling going on. We go to Australia for some of this, and one of the perspectives is a serial killer. In number 18, I have In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. I also read this pretty recently. This follows a group of friends. They were all best friends in college, and one person from their friend group died before they graduated. Now they're adults. They're coming back to campus for their reunion, and they end up finding out what happened to their friend when she died. Also, this book has impeccable, morally gray characters. Jessica, the main character we're following in this, is so selfish and conceited, but I couldn't help but root for her. It was just very enjoyable to me. In number 17, I have Non-Perfect Strangers by Leanne Moriarty. I loved how isolated the setting was in this. It's a group of strangers, and they're all at this health retreat, and maybe the person in charge of the health retreat is a little iffy, like should they trust her to run this health retreat for them? And you just learn about each of the characters' lives. This is another one, like that John Mars book, that it's not truly thrillery. Like, yeah, you are finding out what's going on, but there's no true mystery thriller aspects to it. It's just enjoying the stories from each of these viewpoints, which I did immensely. In number 16, I have Who is Maud Dixon? This is an author thriller and another book with unlikable characters. We have this author, no one has ever met her, no one knows who she is, but she wrote this huge best-selling book. And we have a very unlikely person, an aspiring author, come to be her secretary, her personal assistant. And we find out some mysteries wrapped up in the identity of this woman and her intentions. This is a book that I'm not sure of the author. I think it's Alexandria Andrews. Does that sound right? You all know. You see the cover up here. That's my guess. Okay, in number 15, I have The Plot by Jean Humph Corlitz. And I have to put this one together with Who is Maud Dixon. I read them around the same time. Like, I'm pretty sure I read them back to back. They're both author thrillers, and they both have a plot that ties around the identity of the author. So they just kind of go together in my head, but I will say I did like The Plot more than Who is Maud Dixon. I just liked where the story went. So our main character is a professor at this writing camp. It's for adults. It's not a kid's thing. And one of his students is like, it doesn't matter how good of a writer I am, I have a plot that is going to sell millions. And then some years go by, and our main character is like, I never heard anything about this book. Turns out that guy had died, and now our main character is like, well, it would be a shame if that story goes without being written. So he writes it, and maybe that story was better left unwritten. In number 14, I have My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyenkon Braithwaite. This is exactly what the title says. Our main character's sister kills her boyfriends, and she always has a reason for doing it, but her sister always has to help her cover it up. And maybe her sister's antics get a little too close to home for our main character. She's a nurse, and she has a crush on one of the doctors she works with, and maybe her sister is overstepping, and the story unravels from there. In number 13, I have The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. I really enjoyed this book, but it's more of just an interesting story than it is a thriller. We have a character who inherits this house. She's adopted. She didn't know her birth parents. Well, it turns out her birth parents died in what they are calling a suicide pact, and they had this cult that lived in this house. And then we start getting some viewpoints from some of the kids who were in this family, and it is just very interesting. In number 12, I have No Exit by Taylor Adams, which is very different from his newer release, which is at the very bottom of this list. No Exit is another impeccable setting. We're at a rest stop, and it is blizzarding. The roads are impassable. Our character is driving home trying to see her mom, who just got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and the roads are too bad. She has to stop stop at this rest area. Well, she finds a child that is locked in a cage in the back of a vehicle. So she knows that someone at this rest stop is driving this car, and she has to figure out who it is, and then she is an unlikely hero to the greatest extent. And it is just a great isolated setting. And now that I'm talking about it, I really want to reread this book. In number 11, I have Blacktop Wasteland by S.A. Cosby. This is an action-y book. If you like cars, if you like drag racing, this is a book for you. We have some great descriptions of car chases. So good. And our main character used to have a little bit of a seedy past, but he's gone straight. But then maybe he gets into a position where he needs some extra money, and he is willing to revert back to his criminal ways. In number 10, I have The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook. Another book I'm not sure is a thriller. Maybe it's just a little witchy. I just wrapped this up in my November wrap-up, so I'll link that below because I kind of talked about it quite a bit. Another great setting. We're in Scotland. We're in this really rundown lighthouse. It's just very misty, very foggy, and we have a few different timelines. We have one in the 90s, one in the 1600s, and then one in 2021. And some girls go missing, and then one of them turns up, but she is the same age she was when she went missing in the 90s. So we're in 2021, and she's still 7 years old, and we're like, what's going on? In number 9, I have Verity by Colleen Hoover. This was just such a wild ride, and it's like I knew some of the jump scares. Like, this book has actual jump scares in it. I knew they were coming, but when they happened, I like broke out into a sweat. That was just so good. What was not amazing about this was the romance, just because Colleen, you know, she does her romances, and I was just expecting more. But the first sentence of this book, shall I read it to you? I hear the crack of his skull before the spattering of blood reaches me. How could you put this book down after that? Colleen just starts her books on another level, and Verity is very well loved in the book community, so I know you know this book. Here's me talking about it. If you were interested, that chunk was all my 4-star books. So now, how many do we have left? We have 8 books left, so these are all 5-star books for me. Just know that. But now I'm going to rank them. In number 8, I have My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. I'm not going to lie. I had a really good time reading this book, but what made it 5 stars was literally like the last couple sentences of what was happening. The book was really good, and then it was just all so worth it to get that last little chunk of content. This is about a couple, and they like to kill people together, kind of together, and maybe the wife starts doing some stuff on her own, and then they are pitted against each other, and their kids are having a hard time with it, obviously. There are murders happening in their community, and they're scared, and it's just super interesting. Yeah, I'm just thinking about that ending. Is this one of the best book endings I've ever read? Yeah, I think it is. In number 7, I have Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I loved this book, especially what was happening at the end. So we have this super swanky apartment building, but all the tenants in it are super secretive. Like, you are not supposed to talk to them. Their identities are supposed to be kept really confidential. And they need apartment sitters. Like, they can't let any of the apartments in this building go unoccupied for too long. And we have a girl, she's super down on her luck. She needs some money. She needs a place to live. She ends up being an apartment sitter here. And we find out what is going on in this apartment building, and it is so good. Even though our main character, our girl who's the apartment sitter, Jules, she was so dumb. Her decisions, it was like super stereotypical, like old horror movie decisions that she was making, but it was a fantastic time. In number 6, I have They Never Learned by Lane Fargo. This is another serial killer type thriller. She is a literature professor, and she likes to kill people. She just, you know, has some sociopathic tendencies, and she likes to kill people, but she tries to make them people who deserve it. So she targets men on their campus who have sexually assaulted or wronged or been generally creepy toward women. And we have a couple different viewpoints, and this was a great time. I was surprised by the twist. A lot of people said they saw it coming. I was surprised by the twist. It was a halfway point twist, which I love in a book, and I would recommend this if you were feeling dark academia and serial killer mixed together. Really good. In number 5, I have The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine. This is a rich people drama. If you like domestic dramas, domestic thrillers, this is a book for you. You've probably heard about this. I think this was a Reese Witherspoon book club pick. But we are following a character who is trying to take over the life of this really wealthy woman, Daphne Parrish. She has a picture-perfect life, perfect husband, perfect kids, perfect house, and we have a con artist who's trying to take over her life. And the plot ensues from there. That's all I'll say. Obviously, I gave this 5 stars. It was a great time. These books are all such quick reads. I was gonna say this is a quick read, but all of these books, thrillers, they just read quickly. In number 4, I have The Kind Worth Killing by Patrick Swanson. Peter Swanson. This book follows a couple different characters, but we have a man who has found out his wife is cheating on him, and he's considering killing her. And he randomly meets a girl on an airplane who is willing to help him. And that girl, her name is Lily. I can remember it. She is another incredible morally gray character. She has had a life that we get some of the backstory for, and it has just kind of put her in a position to kill people. And maybe she likes it. And this is another 50% plot twist that I loved, didn't see coming. I am notoriously bad at seeing plot twists coming. And I just loved this. I will say I kind of wish it would have turned out differently at the end. Nonetheless, how we got there was so good, so twisty, so actiony. I was invested. I loved this book. We are now in the top three thrillers that I read in 2021. In number 3, I have For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. 2 Samantha Downing books in my top 8. This is another dark academia book and another book with questionable characters. I do not think that you can fully like anyone in this book, and that just kept me so entertained. I guess you can say the main viewpoint is a professor at this prestigious high school, and he just kind of resents everyone. He's just always seeing what everyone has that he doesn't, and he's always kind of making people out like they're out to get him. And he just kind of blames everything bad that happens in his life on the people around him. Well, maybe he makes it a hobby of playing with poisons and poisoning people. And then maybe he takes it a little too far, and then we have a huge story from there. We get a couple more viewpoints. We have some exciting things happen. This was just such a great time. And like I said, I just loved disliking everyone and just watching them do things to each other. It was so, so good. And my second favorite thriller of 2021 was Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano. I loved this book so much. This book is definitely a little more lighthearted, a little funnier than some of these thrillers. Finlay is an author. She writes romantic suspense. And when she's talking to her agent at a Panera Bread, a woman overhears her and slips Finlay a card like, here's my husband's name, I'll give you this much money if you murder him. Well, Finlay's like, hold on, wait, I'm not a hit woman. I was talking about the plot of my book. But maybe she's in a position where she kind of needs the money. She's recently divorced. Her husband is kind of plotting to take her custody away from their children. And maybe she's considering it, but she just gets herself into this messy plot, and her babysitter gets in on it with her, and their dynamic was just so good. And she's got a little bit of a love triangle going on in this. So I guess you would call this more romantic suspense, but I just love this so much. This gets some mafia stuff going on in it. It was so, so good. I am not sure. There's a second book in this series. I don't think it's out yet. I think it comes out early next year. Super excited for it. I cannot wait to see where the story goes. And now, the best thriller that I read in 2021. This is not a surprise if you've been around. It's Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. This is just so actiony. This is another one I'm not sure. So yes, there is a mystery, but this is just a high action revenge story. We have 2 unlikely companions. They are dads, and their sons were married to each other, but then their sons were murdered. No one knows what happened, and they had tense relationships with their sons, like were not the most supportive dads with their lifestyle choices. And both of these dads kind of have a criminal background, like they've done some time. And they kind of have experience dealing with the underbelly of society. Is that a way to say that? But there's some motorcycle gangs here. There's some like shady dealings while they are trying to figure out what happened to their sons. So they team up and they go on a violent, exciting spree together. They are just such a great team. There's some funny stuff, there's some good conversations in here about social topics. This book just truly had it all. I don't know what else I can say about it. I loved it. I cried a little bit at the end. I don't do that a lot with books. It was just so good, and I've just thought about it for a while, and I can just vividly remember, I listened to the audio of this, I can just vividly remember what I was doing while I was listening to it, and I feel like that's a good sign for a book. I would recommend this to anyone and everyone. I mean, it does have some pretty graphic, like, violence in it, but the story is just so good. The characters are just so good. This book was impeccable. It's one of my favorite books that I read this year. Highly, highly recommend. If you've read this, please let me know what you thought about it. And with that, I have ranked all 30-something thrillers that I read in 2021. I hope this video is not an hour long. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Let me know your least favorite and your favorite thriller that you read this year. I would love to know that. We've got to do the knife emoji because it's quintessential thriller. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one.